Yes. Hello, folks, and welcome back to Rushcast. And we are on episode 10. This is it. No stopping us now, apart from the 2-week break that we're about to take after this episode. But we'll get back to that in a minute. But yeah, how are you, Paul? How's it going?
I'm good. I'm enjoying the week off effectively. How's your week been so far?
Bloody busy. And it's about to get a whole lot busier because I've got 2 days overtime coming up. Yes, welcome to Rushcast. This is the show where we are going through the entire back catalogue of the Canadian power trio that is Rush. Every week we are going through a different album and we'll be working our way along up until we started with Rush, the self-titled album, 1974, and we'll be finishing with Clockwork. No, we won't be finishing with Clockwork Angels actually, because we are doing every side project and solo album along the way in order of release. So we are actually going to be finishing with Envy of None. Unless something comes out from Envy of None or Giddy Lee in the meantime. But plenty of time between now and then. So we'll cover that when we cover it. But this week we are covering Grace Under Pressure. And this is I find we're repeating ourselves a little bit here. This is a transitional album for the band, but this has been pretty much one long continuing transition as the band's career has gone on, isn't it?
Yeah, it would appear that way.
But this is most notably an album. This is the first album the band has done without Terry Brown as a producer. So this is them going out in the wilderness on their own and showing Grace Under Pressure. Pretty much carrying on from where the band went with Signals. I think this gorgeous artwork, by the way. Continuing on with the observations of the world, pretty much like Subdivisions, but we've taken a more of a dystopian turn on this album. We're still carrying on with the 80s, sort of, this is the new wave theme. We're still quite heavily influenced by the Police. It's still got heavy use of keyboards, but the guitar is back on this album.
Yeah.
I think my sort of headline going ahead, I think I actually prefer this album to Signals. I think there's no song on this album that's better than Subdivisions, or that there's highlights on Signals, but there's a bit of filler on there and a couple of songs that don't quite stick for me. While this one is a bit more consistent. This one I like pretty much all the way through. So yeah, there's peaks and valleys, and the peaks are higher overall on Signals, but in terms of consistent all the way through, I think I prefer this album. But I'll probably decide that as we start talking about the songs as we're going on. But yeah, Paul, you was probably there on release day or close enough to it.
What
do you think of Grace Under Pressure, and what was your initial reaction at the time, and what was the word on the street at the time? How were fans reacting when this came out? Because Signals would have come to terms with Signals at this point.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of Rush fans were not quite sure what to expect with this album until they got it and started listening to it. But it's very much a continuation of the electronic. I mean, it's a very, very keyboard heavy album, yet, as you've already stated, the guitar is also to the fore, and Alec Lifeson is really the tone of the guitar and that is actually quite dark in places, and that seems to set up the mood for the entire album, because the keyboards can be quite brash as well on this album. And as you've said, it's quite a dystopic album just listening to it. and it's bookended by two songs that really sort of, it basically focuses on the Cold War, which was really pretty much at its heights here in the sort of mid-ish 80s, very much a distrust between the East and the West. And these two songs center on those, the first and the last one, and that seems to color everything else on this album. I enjoyed it because I'm very much in the camp that I was interested to see where they were going to go and going along for the ride. But again, with a lot of Rush fans, it again divided opinion still further. I think, let me just quickly, again, just looking at what was read here, it said here, Grace Under Pressure received strong, though mixed reactions from fans and critics. Many were pleased at the introduction of a more guitar heavy mix after Lifeson had taken a back seat on Signals, though equally many of Rush's original fans who were desperate for the hard rock were disappointed as Rush delved further into the world of synthesizers and electronic music. And again, on this album, you've got two songs. There's no bass guitar at all. It's all bass pedals.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of very disappointed bass fans and like Geddy Lee fans on this one.
Slapping the bass.
Yes, it's slapping the bass. It was a very, I like the album, but I think it's very much an album of its time. Certainly in the threat, very much at this point, sort of 84, 85, of nuclear annihilation, and of course the first and the last songs sort of focus on those. So it was obviously it very much influenced how Neil was writing lyrics, and he's really sort of gone to town on this. And you've already said about Terry Brown. Obviously, he was no longer part of the team, and always known as the fourth member of Rush. So they were really going through the change in as you said, the album Grace, the title album, the title of the album, sorry, Grace Under Pressure, really sort of highlights what the band were feeling at this time. It says here, and it's put much more succinctly than I can put it. Initially, the band agreed to produce the album with Steve Lillywhite, but Lillywhite backed out of the project shortly before the start of the sessions, causing the band considerable difficulty. And Lillywhite explains, he says, "Oh God, Rush hate me. They hate me. They hate me. Because I said I'd produce them, then I didn't. The only time I've ever almost been threatened with having my legs broken in the music business by their manager." So it didn't start off well. And it says, with the commitment to a new album looming and difficulty finding a suitable producer to work with, they decided to produce the album themselves, with assistance from Peter Henderson, who had formerly worked with Frank Zappa, Supertramp, and King Crimson. And the name of the album reflects not just the lyrical content, but the somewhat self-imposed pressure the band found themselves under in their desire to consistently progress. So there was a lot riding on this album. They were determined to carry on, and they needed to make this album work. I would agree with you that
I think the thing I've got written here as
Yeah,
well
go
is
on.
that a lot of producers just were intimidated. If anything, they just went, "Oh,
Yeah.
they're not." How much they'd chopped and changed throughout the years as well, as we mentioned last episode. There's 6 years difference between 2112 and Signals.
Yeah.
So I think it was a lot of producers didn't quite know what to do with Rush, didn't know what they would be expected to come up with. And not only that, I think a lot of musicians, maybe in the studio, some producers can be quite intimidating to musicians. I think in Rush's case, it's the other way round. I don't think you're gonna boss them about or whatever, because they're gonna go, no, we know what we're doing, which you think would be a dream to work with. But
yeah, I think they were. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Pretty much, yeah, it was self-produced, and I've just got here. They had no problem feeding their influences, their sound, with anything that inspired them, whether it was synths, whether it was new wave style of guitar, or an Andy Summers reggae-esque guitar that you can hear on The Enemy Within, which you're hearing actually is over the signal. Blah, blah, blah. It became a daunting task for them, that they felt essentially that they were a band that could not get somebody to work with them. A lot of people were intimidated. They just didn't know what to do with them. So Peter Henderson basically came in to put the cherry on the top, turned some knobs, cleaned up some areas here and there, but really offered very little in the way of difference from what Rush had already recorded and written themselves. So if anything, this is the first Rush self-produced project. It would be Grace Under Pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. And as I say, I agree with you on this one. It was good to have the guitar back, but again, Alec Lyson was experimenting an awful lot with different types of sound. But he's on a lot of this. His guitar is actually there's quite a bit of reverb and a lot of chorus on the guitar. But having said that, he says, I know, in fear of repeating myself, is that having said that, there are still some nice guitar work on this album and some couple of really good solos again, which seemed to, well, not seemed, they did, they fitted really well, and undeniably Alec Lifeson. And yeah, with this album, it was, says here, it provided the developmental groundwork for what many, including Geddy Lee, considered to be one of their very best albums, which is the following one, the Power Windows, which I think is an interesting comment. I'm not sure if I completely agree with that, but I can see why, because and we'll obviously, when we get to that album, we'll look at that. But
it's funny actually, because I saw a clip the other day and it said Geddy Lee's favourite Rush album. So sorry.
That's all right.
And I thought, I watched that then, clicked on it. And then he went, it was seconds long. And again, this said this in writing, Geddy Lee's favourite thing. But Geddy doesn't actually say, this is my favourite album. He just went, and there's Grace Under Pressure, and he held up the vinyl. And he said, and this was the first album where we went out on our own. Up until that point, Terry produced everything.
Yeah.
This was produced thing. Hence the title, Grace Under Pressure. That was that. Well, where did he say it was his favourite then? So I thought that was a bit of a clickbait thing there. So
no, I think for Rush at this point, it probably
would be a standout album for him because it was.
Yeah, because obviously of what went into it and the circumstances in which they found themselves.
Yeah. So probably a crowning achievement. He'd go, no, I was. Yeah. Maybe he was saying like, maybe the question was, what's the album you're most proud of?
Yeah.
Maybe,
possibly. But I think in some respects there was as much pressure on their album for this album as arguably the pressure they were under for 2112 to produce that album, because obviously there was an awful lot riding on them on that album after Caressa still flopped. This is, I mean, obviously they've really established themselves, but in some respects going out on their own was probably bringing similar pressures to produce something that they would ultimately be happy with, but it will also enable them to carry on and be relatively commercially successful. But I say we'll carry on talking about this, and we'll get to all of the statistics of this one towards the end, I dare say. So
right, so shall we get into the tracks?
Yeah, let's do so.
Right, so Distant Early Warning. Now, when I said last week that I didn't think, as much as I love subdivisions of a song, I didn't ever think it was a very good album opener, and I didn't think it was a very good concert opener either, as much as I did love the song.
Yeah.
Distant Early Warning, this is how you open an album. This is because it's not necessarily one of the best Rush songs either. I think it's a good single, but to me, this is an album this is a song that sets the tone for an album. You've got a nice introduction, an interesting introduction. The song builds up nicely. We've got the opening vocals. Everything's still building up. You've got cool guitars. You've got a little bit of keyboard, a little bit of production. The drums are just boom, boom. You know, he's just building up and setting the tone. And then incomplete, and then bam, 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 bam. You know, right. We're getting somewhere now. We're opening, and then I like the way this album builds up in different layers, and it just goes off on totally different.
Yeah,
it goes down all different roads as well, and
mm-hmm.
It's got that nice little riff at the end. But you know, and yeah, and we got it at the end. We've got a great chorus as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is you get like a little bit of everything thrown in one song, and then you're left. And then we open the album really opens on the next song. But yeah, that's the way you do it to me. It sets the tone, it builds up, a little bit of unexpecteds in there. But yeah, it's almost like a little. Not sure actually. I was going to say that. I'll say it now because
because people will be saying, what was he going to say? What was he going to say?
It's almost like this song so far is like a little recap of what's been.
Yeah.
And it's like like now you're up to speed.
Yeah.
And then on the next song.
It takes it. It does.
After Image, then now we'll carry on, sort of thing.
Yeah, it is. I like this as an opening song, like you yourself. I say that very almost indistinct rumble of synthetic noise, bringing the whole album in, and then you're effectively, and one thing to say, officially for the first time, electronic drums on this album. This is the first album with electronic drums, whereas I think before anything electronic sounding was acoustic drums treated electronically. On this, it's definitely electronic, and these would be Simmons pads on this. And you've got electronic drums on this straight away, a mixture of acoustic, and that gives it a slightly different flavour as well. But yeah, I like the way this comes in, and you've got the bass, which is quite busy at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then you've got them very spacious guitar chords that really paints that mood of the song. It's and of course you get these sequenced keyboard sounds, arpeggiated keyboards going on this, which is something they were and had sort of been doing a little bit of, but it really comes to the fore on this album. And it's described here as blatantly contemporary new wave sound. Says here, significant number of fans were critical of Signal's unprecedented use of synthesizers, but Rush had completely ignored this, and they made them even more to the fore than before. Says here, Geddy's formerly aggressive bass sound is far more restrained, while the guitars soaked in reverb and chorus punctuate the bleak dystopic atmosphere. Despite the extensive use of electronic percussion, the chorus of a song is arguably more upbeat than anything on Signals. The distant early warning line is an array of radar stations in northern Canada. I don't know if you've got any sort of information on this, but I'll just say a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's fun. Yeah.
Array of radar stations in northern Canada designed to detect incoming Soviet nuclear bombers. At the time the lyric was written, the Cold War was at its height, and the fear and paranoia of the time is reflected throughout this song. Within the first few lines, Geddy sings of an ill wind bringing heavy water and acid rain. The lyrical expression of atomic war hits hard. This is a song of high pressure times, though unlike many of Peart's previous lyrics, the content is not abstract, but all too real. So again, this is Neil carrying on and more about human experience than distancing himself away from the sci-fi and the fantasy that he wrote on earlier albums. This is very much steeped in realism.
Yeah, I mean, the threat of nuclear attack was quite.
Yeah, it was.
And you only have to listen to it's in all the albums that were released around that time, and Iron Maiden covered it. Iron Maiden even covered. Well, they covered the subjects later on in around 2006, 2008, with a song called "Brighter Than a Thousand Suns." And he just said we fought any day now. And it's funny, a YouTuber I watched, he sort of reflected on how this is a guy that's he's about 50, in his early 50s, and he was kind of sort of saying how things were and how his generation never really appreciated what they were inheriting, and didn't really fight to protect it. But he said, and he showed us this. He showed on the YouTube this video that he watched in school. They were showing this in school, and it was like what to do in a nuclear attack. Like if your nuclear bomb goes off, this is what you do. And it was take your door off and put it over your sofa and hide behind the sofa with the door in the way and just hope for the best. And he said, like, he went, I genuinely think I was traumatized. And I used to cry myself to sleep. I would lay in my bed, cry my eyes out, because I thought I wasn't going to wake up. I thought this is it. And what a thing to do to a kid. He says, so I think a lot of my generation, because after that you had the ravers and, drugs, party, ecstasy came along and acid. And he said, because we grew up basically thinking, well, it could all be over next week.
Yeah, tomorrow may never come.
And we didn't think about the future because we were raised with the thought that there wouldn't be one.
Yeah, it is. It was that way. I mean, you talking about them saying in the event of do this and do that. I mean, there were other silly things like, oh, you better put a load of tin foil over yourself and all this sort of stuff. And I think, I mean, it probably exaggerated, but I always remember the comedy show Young Ones, and Neil was going, oh, well, I'm painting myself white, man, to deflect the effects of the blast. And all this sort of, you've got to put all the food in the food zone and you've got to protect it with, but that were the sort of things that were going through people's minds at this point. So
they'd never fall for something like that now, though, would they?
Oh, well, you never know. It just, but going back to the song, I like the chorus because it's sort of really, it's quite a punchy chorus. Musically, it's really pushing it quite hard. And he really, as you say, it opens up and really gets into it there. But the lyrics, the world weighs on my shoulders, but what am I to do? You sometimes drive me crazy, but I worry about you. I know it makes no difference to what to what you're going through, but I see the tip of the iceberg and I worry about you. Yes, very. Yeah, you can read this, and I think in some respect, I think it was an interview with. I don't think it was Neil Peart. I think it was with Geddy Lee, and I think Geddy and Alex, when they read the lyrics for this album, they went, Neil is really peed off. He's really not happy about things because he's really cutting through all of this. And but yeah, I mean, the lyric discusses the fear of a loss of connection in a fast-moving world. I'm reading from this. This isn't my words. Both on a personal level, so hard to stay together, passing through revolving doors, and a geopolitical level, cruising under your radar, watching from satellites. So it's personal fear of losing a relationship and a political fear of nuclear annihilation. So he's been quite clever here, and he always has and was clever, that he's made it very personal, but at the same time looking at the bigger picture with what's going on in the world. Yeah, became quite a favourite with the fans over the course of time, and it would appear on quite a few tours. It wasn't played every tour, but it would appear there as a staple and was regarded as more of a latter day classic.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That photo hasn't aged well, though, is it?
No, I guess not. But I think that the thing is, though, Joe, I suppose if we all looked at pictures of ourselves from to what we are now, we'd probably say the same, wouldn't we? But I think Rush would be the first ones to say they were never into the visual and the fashion thing.
Well, the videos were there. Again, I always bring them up, but it's the same with Maiden. Their video repertoire was always a bit naff. But if you could choose a place that's going to be your weakness, that's the best weakness to have.
I think so. Certainly in the music world, because the music, and it's something that Geddy said, and he summed it up. He said, at the end of the day, it's about the music, and it really is. That's the thing. Does that stand the test of time? And for Rush, it definitely has. So
right.
Yeah, so, I've got nothing else to say about that. I do like the solo on this one, and I like what Geddy and Neil are doing underneath it with punctuating the rhythm on that bit, because it sort of almost lays it back and then it brings it back forward. So I thought it was quite. I think it sort of just shows that they haven't really forgot their roots as such. They were still interspersing these bits of what they could become renowned for in this new setting, I guess, of where they were going.
Yeah, well, talking about After Image now, we'll move on to that. The thing that's often said about this album is that it's of its time, but I like the fact that this is of its time. And when you listen to a song like After Image, what other time could a song like this be written? Because with today's production, or even in the 70s, I don't think this song would sound the same. I think.
No, I think you're right. It definitely wouldn't sound, and it wouldn't have that. It wouldn't have that soul. It hasn't got that. It wouldn't have that soul that it's got on this album. The way they've captured it.
I think this is a great little song. It's high energy. It's up tempo. Again, it feels like this is where the album really properly opens. We open with, I wouldn't say familiar territory with this.
No, it's not.
But
no,
but it's a tone setter, I find. But this one I really like. I really like the that, well, sort of like a piano riff, really like, and then you've got the reggae sort of, and but no, great the way it kicks in and takes up the thing. You've got a great drum beat underneath this. I love that little riff as well, that at the end of it. And overall, I really enjoy this song. I think it's great.
Yeah, I do like this one. Musically, it's quite heavy. I mean, the keyboard sound and the guitar are pretty heavy on this, and that's all underpinned by really quite deep growling bass pedals on this, and then as you said, you've got Pierre really pushing this one along. Yeah, it's heavier. It's a heavy electronic sound with this, and the guitar, as you're saying, playing them little melodies. It's sort of like a question and an answer, because he's playing often against the keyboards on this, which is quite a nice. I like it. I like the effect of it. It sounds really good. Well, have you got anything else about this at all?
Not really.
No,
This
it just says,
song pretty much,
yeah,
it speaks
yeah.
for itself, really.
Well, it does, doesn't it? I say, after the imagery that we've been given on the first track, this one is really quite personal, isn't it? About a different kind of pressure, that of bereavement and grief. As you said, it pretty much speaks for itself. Certainly with things like just the opening lines. Suddenly you were gone from all the lives you left your mark upon.
Oh, this is actually a tribute to someone. I think
Yes,
it's
yes, it's
he worked on their staff. I think he was he one of
yeah,
their road crew
yeah. I think it was. It's Robbie
or
Whelan.
studio engineer, something like
It's
that. Yeah.
Robbie Whelan is. This is the tribute to him. This particular
Mm.
song, but it but they say it's a lyric that's specific enough to have a real depth, but that is broad enough to have meaning to many, and it's very hard to achieve that. I mean, so with lines, it brings up here the line, "This is something that just can't be understood," and yet this powerful lyric makes a mean attempt, as if to drive the point even harder, despite the undeniable nature of After Image as a powerful rock song. Geddy completely foregoes the bass guitar on this, instead in favour of the keyboards and the bass pedals. It says here, licensed guitar, huge amount of space on this song, both producing dreamy textures and arguably the heaviest playing since Moving Pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. It says here, the electronic breakdown section towards the end of the song picks up from where Signal's The Weapon left off. Though now we are hearing a band fully at home with their electronic direction. Again, it's very hard to just turn around and disagree with any of that. It's yeah, I think it's quite a hard punching song. It's
Yeah.
very much so. A bit, it's quite obviously melancholic, but also quite touching. Some of these lyrics quite poignant. We ran by the water on the wet summer lawn. I see the footprints I remember. I feel the way you would. Yeah, I feel the way you would. Yeah, so I end up saying all the lyrics at this point if I'm not careful. It again, I think for anyone who's never really, I think lyrically, for anyone who's never heard any Rush stuff, I think you could pick up any of these albums and just listen to and look at the lyrics, and you can't fail to realise that there's such a lot of thought that's gone into these. And you can pretty much pick up any of the records and think, yeah, there's been a lot of care put into these, and this is definitely no exception to that. Yeah, great. I like this song, like you. I do enjoy this one. I don't think it was played very much live. I think it was only played on this tour.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Because I think this would be a good,
yeah,
not a set opener, but a good second or third song.
Yeah,
because it's quite high energy. It's quite thing. Neil's quite busy on the kit on this one as well. Yeah, I think this would have been a nice.
Don't quote me on that. I know they played it on
sort of like first quarter, maybe first 5 songs, somewhere in that bit would have just got things going.
Definitely. Yeah, very much so. But I'm fairly certain it wasn't played, because I had a quick sort of flick through subsequent sets on other tours, and I couldn't see it. So, but I may have missed it. So, but, yeah. No, great song. Enjoyed it, and it was interesting listening back to this album. I must admit, I haven't listened to this album in its entirety for a while, so it actually sounded quite fresh.
Yeah,
Listening to this again.
yeah, it's nice when you listen by doing what we're doing with this show, and
yeah, absolutely.
with digging out an album that you might not listen to for a while.
Yeah,
you're getting reacquainted with it. You notice stuff that you
yeah,
missed, or you remember stuff that you.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously I was a lot younger. I mean, I was only in my sort of mid-20s, early to mid-20s in this at this time. Yeah, it's early 20s. When you now being a 60-year-old man, you listen to the lyrics and they have a little bit this after image. The lyrics for this sort of really, yeah, just a lot of meaning, especially when you go through a phase where you've obviously some people you know are no longer around. Yeah, they sort of impact you a bit more, I guess. And that's the same for anyone, don't matter what you are. So yeah, and this one in particular, I really enjoyed listening to this particular song, despite its lyrical content.
So yeah, let's move on then to Red Sector A. Now,
yeah,
this is quite a cool atmospheric song that's sort of continually building as it goes along. Very keyboard heavy,
yeah.
But there's some delicious guitar on this, as well. There's just Alex is just adding texture to the song as it goes on, and it's just like this. And there's a really nice guitar tone on this as well, like a guitar sound, that. Just it's almost like he's using the guitar as a keyboard, But yeah, really good song. Again, as much as it's keyboard driven, Neil is still very busy behind the kit.
Oh yes, he is. Yeah, very much so.
Now, lyrically, did you say this was something to do with the NASA?
Well, they because we
is this a
mentioned
follow up from?
well, it's not. It's a totally ambiguous title for this song. That's what they're saying. The name of this song is completely ambiguous. The fact that it comes from the name of the area where the band watched the launch of the Columbia in 1981, that site of such hope and optimism. This ambiguity, this meaningless clinical title, is part of the horror that this song about a nameless, timeless place evokes. So basically, it's deliberately. Yeah, it's just that ambiguity to this is trying to paint a picture about something which a nameless, timeless place. It evokes something that we can't quite grasp. That's what I'm reading from there. I think it's just they must have thought, well, that's a good song title. Let's use it for this. That's how it comes from. Let's see what else it said. Basically, this is inspired. Again, quite sort of dark, really. Geddy Lee's mother was interned in a Nazi concentration camp at Bergen-Belsen, I think that's how it's pronounced, until it was liberated by the forces of the UK and Canada in 1945. She had remarked to her son, who then relayed this on to Peart, that she simply could not believe that there was any civilization left. And Geddy says, I once asked my mother her first thoughts upon being liberated. She didn't believe liberation was possible. She didn't believe that if there was a society outside the camp, how they could allow this to exist. So she believed that society was basically done in. The song asked the question, are there any human beings to survive? A simple question with a complicated answer. Anyone listening to this song would likely to surmise that it was recorded in the early 80s. The synthesizers on this are very brash, and the song is more electronic than any other on the album. And again, it's all bass pedals, and you've got that arpeggiated, where that brings it in. It remains a powerful song about a subject that is almost impossible to relate to without resorting to platitudes or cliche, neither of which are present here. Again, Neil's done a very good job on this. I mean, just the opening lines, all that we can do is just survive. All that we can do to help ourselves is stay alive. You know, which ragged lines of
It's quite odd, really, isn't it, that
Yeah.
Neil wrote the lyrics about inspired by
Yeah.
something Gilly Lee's family.
Yeah. It's just an interesting way of putting it across, really. But again, it just carries on this very melancholic dystopian sort of feel of the album so far, really. Again, I think with this particular song, it would come under criticism like After Image because there's no bass guitar on it. But as you said, the guitar on this sounds really nice. Some great little runs and phrasing on his solo, and underneath that, Peart is, I mean, he's keeping the bass drum 4 to the floor, but over the top of it, he's playing some very abstract phrasing and rhythms and drum breaks and a mixture of acoustic and electronic drums. Really, drumming wise, it's not an easy one to even try and work out just how he does it. But again, very, very, very brilliantly done, and as you said, with the textures of the whole song, got played on quite a few different tours. This one, it was regarded again as a pretty regarded as an electronic classic by them. So, and I think this is one, I think Peart commented on this, obviously, in the days when they were playing this live, before in-ear monitors, he would have to he had a massive wedge monitor beside him so that he could pick up the sequences of stuff. And he said he believes that was responsible for some of his hearing loss. Because anything like that with a sequencer has to be particularly loud because you've got to get that timing right. Because if you're out of sequence with a mechanical metronomic time, then it just doesn't work. So but obviously with the increase of technology and in-ear monitors, that was something that was no longer a problem. So yeah, that's just an aside really to that. I'm just looking through the lyrics here. I mean, is there anything lyrically that sort of leaps out at you on this one?
Not that you haven't already covered, to be honest.
Right.
I did read a thing about Rush were talking about the ills of communism, and that's pretty pretty cool of them. It's like there was a woman that was quite traumatized by communism and was quite happy to come to America, and she wrote a couple of books, and the same people were complaining that Neil had read those books and thought they were quite interesting, and you didn't like him, you didn't like her, but now they're talking about
It to me, it's I don't know whether the guys actually thought about that, or whether they just sort of thought, well, it's an interesting concept, we can write a song about that. But effectively, I don't know, perhaps it's a little bit more difficult because this is something that harps on somebody's real, and certainly somebody close to the band, obviously being Geddy's mother, is very much more personal. So it's, I mean, if you start sort of slagging that off, it could be taken personally. Whereas I suppose with Ayn Rand, which is who you're obviously talking about, I don't know. I think people probably felt that they felt perfectly justified to have a pop at Neil about reading her works, but because this is an actual experience of a Nazi concentration camp, perhaps they're sort of people realise they can't really say things about that because they weren't there and they don't know what it was like. So yeah, it's it was again just a very touching song, but unfortunately highlighting the dark
Oh,
side
that wasn't
of
just
humanity.
that song in
Nah,
particular, but it was
yeah,
with the whole theme of the album,
yeah.
especially with the next track as well.
Oh yes, of
But
course.
yeah, I know Red Sector A's got
Yeah,
that, but
it is. I think that this
with the looming Cold War and
yeah, exactly. I think this song though in particular just actually goes to show, sadly, the dark side of humanity. Really, especially with regards to the subject being the concentration camps. And I mean, certainly things was it. I hear the sound of gunfire at the prison gates. Are the liberators here? Do I hope or do I fear? For my father and my brother, it's too late, but I must help my mother stand up straight. I mean, well, you can't really add anything to that, can you? I mean, that's just so to the point.
yeah.
But yeah.
Well,
yeah.
things get more cheerful on the next song, "The Enemy Within," the third part in the Fear trilogy.
Yeah, which is part one. Part one. I think musically, it's certainly a little more jolly, as you say. But you've already said about it, the ska and the reggae stylings that were touched on occasionally, and signals are fully realised in this song, aren't they? I mean, you can really hear that, and obviously, as we've already said, part one of the Fear series. You got anything on this one, Joe? Or is it comments?
Funny enough, I've just got an email here from Sting, and he's CC'd in Andy Summers and Stuart Copeland saying they want their song back. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. But
oh dear.
But one notable thing people
I thought they yeah, go on. I was going to say I thought they might have sent a message in a bottle, but oh dear.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and people will be saying, "Oh dear, typical drummer joke and sense of humour." But there we go.
No, if I ever do meet Stuart Copeland or any of them, and they do mention emails, I'll be sure to go. Oh, I thought you sent
a message in a bottle.
But as I said, I felt Signals coincided quite well with Genesis's Invisible Touch album. It's said that Grace Under Pressure, a good two, is actually Ghost in the Machine by the Police.
Yeah.
Apparently these albums are pretty neck and neck, and it's often a thing of debate of which one's better or which thing. But yeah, you don't always have to have two albums by the same band to have a good.
Oh no, definitely not. That's a highly regarded album by the Police. That one.
But yeah, I do like this song though. Piss taking aside, but
oh, it is. It's a good song, and again, there's the style of it is part of the Fear, being part of the Fear series is totally different from the previous two. With the feel of the music, and the lyrics, it's all about. Sorry, Joe. I think you were going to say something. Do you want to say?
No, I wasn't. No.
Oh right. Whereas the other two parts 2 and 3, have dealt with fear caused by external threats, this song describes the unhelpful nature of self-induced fear, hypervigilance, and paranoia.
Yeah.
So everything internalized on this particularly, and hence the title, "The Enemy Within."
Yeah. Painting one into a corner. Yeah.
Yeah. Great description of this frantic bass line on this album, punctuated by jagged chorus-laden guitars on this, soon gives way to a dreamy electronic post-chorus section. frantic and ambiguous nature of the music suits the lyric, which arguably provides the first glimmer of optimism on the album. The fearful verses give way to a defiant chorus. I'm not giving in to security under pressure. I'm not missing out on the promise of adventure. I'm not giving up on implausible dreams, a motivation to defeat the enemy within.
Well said.
So, well, that's what it says there. I mean, it says experience to extremes lyrically. I was just looking at that. I think that was where the implausible dreams was the end of that. But there you go. It's a complete opposite. Yeah, and it is though, isn't it? I mean, things like suspicious looking stranger flashes you a dangerous grin, shadows across your window, was it only trees in the wind? Yeah, it just, wow. Yeah, again, just brilliantly put together. But I do like that sort of scar feel to this one. It punches along. And on this tour, I think I mentioned it last week, this was the tour where they did all three parts of Fear in order. So it would start off with this one, going into The Weapon, and then finishing with Witch Hunt. And they did that on this tour.
So you saw this tour, by the way?
I didn't know. I didn't. I was going to get to that. This is one of the tours where they never touched Europe. It was one of their
really?
It was one of their shorter tours. They only toured North America, Canada, and the US, with a few dates in Japan, 3 dates in Japan, and 2 in Hawaii. And the tour was a relatively short one by their standards of 82 dates. So
yeah,
they never toured it here, so I never see them on this tour.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
And I think there might be another tour or two.
I don't know why that would have done, because they certainly didn't struggle to sell out a venue in the UK. I mean,
no, but
they would fill, but they would do it for multiple nights as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
they'd do Wembley Arena for a couple of nights.
I don't know why they didn't tour Europe with it. Perhaps, relatively speaking, it didn't sell so well in Europe as it did in North America.
Even if they downgraded back to Hammersmith Odeon, or I don't know if Brixton Academy was then, but
I don't know.
Surely they would have done a Hammersmith Odeon.
Yeah,
easily.
I think there must have been a very good reason for them not doing this and not doing the tour here. But I had to double check it, because I definitely didn't see them on this tour. And when I've looked at the tour dates, it's all North America, with just them few odd dates in Japan, and then I think it finished. I don't know if it finished in Hawaii. I can't remember. I think it went back to mainland America and finished there. But yeah, 82 dates this tour. And yet, it depends which magazine and listing and chart you believe. Some say that this was their 5th best-selling album, Grace Under Pressure, 1.2 million. But then others have listed it as number 7, about 1.1 million. So it's around about there. So it's not that it's sold badly, but I think at the time, I think I heard that in America this sold pretty well, and it was quite a big selling album in North America as a whole. So I guess that's why they concentrated the tour there.
Yeah, okay.
So, but
no,
I didn't see it. I didn't see it.
Yeah, but overall, this is a fast, energetic song.
Yeah.
Again, we've got the reggae and ska influences. I like the keyboard sort of breaking it between the sort of the end of the chorus. That boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
I keep doing that tonight. I don't know. Keep messing with my mic. You still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
No, good track.
Yeah.
It doesn't outstay its welcome, and moves the album on quite nicely.
Yeah, it's again, they're just playing around with the styles on this one, and yeah, I think it's been well put together, which what they always do anyway.
Yeah, they find a nice balance on this where all the songs are different, but they are quite,
Yeah,
they fit nicely together, don't they?
Yeah, no, I do. So at
So
this
yeah,
point, at that point, that should have been the Fear series finish, but they decided to write another one much later. So, but that was it for the time being.
so are we on side 2 now?
We are on
Yeah,
side
so
2.
the Body Electric.
Yes.
Pretty good video for this one as well.
Mm.
Like full production, actors and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
Again, this is quite heavy with the keyboards. It's really Neil sort of lead drums on this one. It's just
Yeah.
like a revolving beat, really, rather than he's not all over the kit. But
No.
But I really like the keyboards on this one. I really like the atmosphere on it. And this one that is actually referenced in 1984, if I'm not.
Yeah.
Puts the codes in. Adjust the text that Winston is always adjusting. But I thought the whole 1001 thing was like a Morse code or something.
Yeah, I've got something about that, but I don't know if you've got anything about that.
I just read that it was referenced in 1984, which funny enough, I'm actually halfway through reading at the moment.
Oh, right, yeah.
I'm reading it with my son.
Okay.
And have you read 1984?
I've not read it, or if I did, it was years and years ago.
Boy, everyone, if you haven't read it, definitely read it. And if you have read it, read it again.
Yeah.
Because it's everything in it is just relevant. It's crazy how relevant that book is.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I really like this track.
I like this one. I like the way the drums come in. It's very you get in again that mixture of acoustic and electronic drums, and it's a very mechanical rhythm, and it's
I think that's what I was trying to get at. Yeah,
it is very, very, very deliberate, but it's just it just pushes the whole thing along very nice. And then of course you get Geddy Lee's very twangy bass coming in over the top on that intro. Really, and it does give way to a very, and it says here, it gives way to the lush keyboards and guitars that we have at this point, that we're sort of beginning to expect from this album. And it just gives up that quite a panoramic sort of scope on it, really. It just but it does here, it says taking the modern listener immediately back to 1984, which is what you just said. Yeah, the lyric on first listen appears to be simple, an entertaining science fiction story of a rogue android trying to break free from its programming and the code that imprisons it. As with most Rush lyrics, however, there are deeper and more satisfying ways to interpret it. It replays each of the days, 100 years of routines, bows its head and prays to the mother of all machines. It says here, machine-like, our, human, daily routines continue on and on as we follow our social programming. This song appears to be yet another call to arms for the individual to seek and fight for freedom like this android protagonist.
Oh, that's cool.
That's quite cool, really. I mean, as when you look at the lyrics of it, and it's yeah, you can see it and you can hear it. It just yeah. So trying to change its program, trying to change the code, change the mode, crack the code, images conflicting into they say data or data overload. Yeah, Yeah, memory banks unloading, bytes break into bits. A lot of techno speak there. Unit 1's in trouble and it's scared out of its wits. Yeah. Going back though, what you were saying about the 1001,001, it says here, Rush's interest in technology has been plain to see from the subjects of their songs and the technology used to produce them. It has been noted that the refrain of this song, 1001,001, is the binary for the letter I in the ASCII computer. I think that's how it's pronounced. ASCII or ASCII. I think it's ASCII, ASCII, computer language. So it's all about the individual I.
So I again.
Yeah,
Back to
that's yeah.
Yeah.
Says here, and I totally agree with this. Is one of my favourite parts of the album. Frantic and thrilling instrumental section in the middle proves to any doubters that Rush have not lost interest in their traditional rock instruments. Alec Lifeson's guitar solo draws influences from the previous decade's funk guitarists before leading into a brilliantly colourful display of rock lead guitar, and the bass and the drums provide a thrilling backdrop to this solo that surely restored the faith of many had lost in Lifeson after the backseat he appeared to take on the previous album, Signals. Yeah, it's one of my favourite parts of the whole album. Actually, I love the solo section of this, and I love the momentum that the bass and the drums push on this particular part of the song, and especially towards the end as well, where you just got that swirling keyboard over the top of it. Yeah, just absolutely superb. Again, I've seen them play this one live. I loved it. I thought it was a great song. I don't know again whether they played this on any other tours apart from they must have done. But I see them play this on the Clockwork Angels tour.
Yeah, I like the video to this. It's got to be said as well.
Yeah,
it reminds me of an old episode of Blake 7.
Yeah,
is,
yeah, it is. It does actually. Yeah, it conjures up that image.
A bit more American with the hair, but yeah. Right, moving on then to one of my favourite songs on this album, Kid Gloves.
Yeah.
I love this song. I love the guitar. I love that main riff, and I just love the. Oh, on the last song as well. Yeah, I do really like the sort of textures between the keyboards and the guitar. It melds quite well. But yeah, but Kid Gloves, I just love this main riff around it. It's one of the simpler songs that Rush has wrote, but I like the hook. I like the way it rings round, and yeah, this is just a good beat underneath it, and yeah, just a really simple song that just works. And
yeah, it does. It's actually deceptively. It's very catchy, as you've said, but there's a very subtle time signature change in this on this song.
I don't doubt that for a second.
It's very subtle. Instead, it flips between 4/4, basically common time, and 5/4. But you don't really feel it when you're listening to it, but it's there. And again, it just it just says that, you know, Rush hadn't forgotten how to write what people would consider to be clever songs, and they're playing things in a clever way and you don't even realize they're doing it. It just sounds like something very straightforward, and it is, but to make it sound that way, it's actually, they've had to work quite hard to make it sound that way. But I like the guitar intro on this. I mean, that sort of arpeggiated start riff goes into that, so it just goes seamlessly into that, almost like a pop rock, catchy pop rock chorus on it. But yeah, and it sort of lifts up there, doesn't it? It's sort of almost jolly sounding, and it really bounces along quite nicely. I liked it. And again, this is one I hadn't really listened to for a while.
Yeah, it's got a good little solo section, so it sort of breaks
Yeah,
down. And Geddy's on the bass on this one,
yeah,
and then Geddy just get Alex just get and it just
yeah,
boom, boom, and then bang, and
yeah.
straight into that opening riff again. Yeah, great
It,
song, great stuff.
it is a great song. It's almost as if it,
This
the
is
way
an
Alex,
underrated gem
yeah,
in my.
yeah, it's almost as if you can sense the glee in Alec Lifeson, that he's let him rip a little bit on this one. It, it sounds like he enjoys playing this particular number. I'm not saying he doesn't enjoy the others, but there's sort of almost like a sense of freedom in this.
Yeah,
It's heavily guitar orientated, this particular number. Yeah, great, great. It says here the lyric to Kid Gloves is one of the more ambiguous on the album, written at a time when Peart's lyrical style was for the first time becoming less specific and more holistic in its approach. This lyric describes the challenges of growing up in an undiscovered world and the maturation, or the process of becoming mature, that we all go through to a greater or lesser degree. And in the first verse, Peart writes that it is cool to be so tough. In the second, the phrase is reversed. It's tough to be so cool. A simple lyric that works well. Mentions here about this, they describe it as a crescendous guitar solo and the reprise of the irrepressible chorus. The song finishes, and I was going to mention this, and I don't know whether grin-inducing false finishes at the end of this album, which brings this deceptively clever song to an end. Something that Rush actually became sort of renowned for, these sort of false finishes, and they would do that quite a few times live, in a live setting. So, and I think they possibly honed it on this particular song, and it went on from this particular number. So yeah, I like it. It's a great, in some respects, this is the odd one on the album,
yeah,
but in a good way. That's what I mean, in a good way. It's not just a filler or anything like that. It doesn't mean to say that it's less. It's just a nice counterfoil, I guess, to the rest of the album on this particular, and where it's placed as well. I think it's especially after Body Electric, which is probably quite, I mean, lyrically quite heavy, and you got that, as you said, it rumbles along and it's quite forceful and in the lyrical content. And this one just comes across a little bit lighter to me anyway, although it's still got something to say. I've got nothing else to say unless you've got anything on lyrics or anything else about it.
Not really, no.
Okay.
Let's move on then to a strange song, actually. But yeah, let's get into it. Red Lenses. Yeah, this is. There's lots going on with this, and yeah, it's got that main sort of keyboard bit, that but it's sort of, again, Neil's doing some odd stuff with the drums where it's not quite. It's like it's building up and then doesn't quite take off till maybe the end, I suppose. But
yeah,
it gets quite jammy as well on there as well, and yeah, it's a odd song, interesting song. That's what.
Yeah, I think of all of them, this is probably the most unusual.
Yeah.
On the album,
and certainly the prog is not gone.
Oh no! I think if anyone thought that they were not capable of playing anything progressive, sadly mistaken.
Yeah,
it's just the context in which they're doing it on this particular song. It says here, and obviously you must have a copy of the lyrics as well. Once again, I've got the big print version. Red Lenses, it says, with the title and lyric uniquely printed all in lowercase, it seems Rush were attempting to make clear that this song was an unusual one. By far the most, it says it, esoteric lyric on the album, Red Lens is a jazz-infused stream of consciousness that paved the way for the sound Rush would later perfect on their next album, with the next album. With the bass and drums holding close to a rigid composition, this piece is clearly influenced by much of the contemporary electronic music of the era, particularly the bridge section that begins the second half of the song. And this section, the style of which has been unprecedented in a Rush album, features an atmospheric synthesizer which underlies a Neil Peart solo of drums and tuned percussion, because it does. I mean, that bit is sort of, and then you've just got Neil just gradually building the drums on that. And actually, with this drum pattern, this is something that would actually begin to influence Neil with regards to constructing drum solos in the future.
Yeah.
You can, and when I listen back to it, I think, yeah, I can see it was sort of the beginning of that sort of way he would do things in drum solos as well. Again, he is quite busy on this one, and again, it's that mixture of acoustic and electronic pads. You're just giving them a slightly different flavour with the whole thing. Have you got anything about the lyrics on this?
I don't know anything about the lyrics, actually. No.
Right.
I was more interested in the structure of the song and the atmosphere of it.
Yeah. I'll just read what's put on here.
Yeah. Okay.
Says here, lyrics. One of the most interesting and unusual aspects of the song was discussed by Peart shortly after the album's release. He said, "I can take someone like T.S. Eliot, who has influenced me greatly over the last few years, and realise that what he was doing was just throwing so many images at you all the time that you were left dizzy. But at the same time, you were left with something. You were stepping into another dimension. So I use that idea on a song like Red Lenses from Grace Under Pressure. I tried to construct a series of ongoing images that just come at you. The colour red was the theme of it, but I twisted it in so many ways." And he says here, "It was the hardest thing I ever wrote because I was trying not to say anything, and each line was saying something. But at the same time, it was trying to be so obscure and so oblique about the way I went around saying it on purpose. It seems confounding, but in the end, you're left with something. T.S. Eliot's poetry is the same way to me. At the end of it, I don't really know what I've read, but it comes back to me. When I think of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, I think that's how his name is, and I don't even know who this person is, or The Wasteland, I can quote lines from them, and I can't say I understand everything that was said, but they move me." That's Neil's comments on these lyrics. It says here, the track is strange but vital Rush song that helped develop the band's songwriting production style, and as I've already mentioned, indeed much of Peart's future live drum solos.
Yeah.
But I was just looking at the lyrics because, again, I see red, it hurts my head. Guess it must be something that I read. It's the colour of your heartbeat, a rising summer sun, the battle lost or won, the flash to fashion and the pulse to passion feels red inside my head. Yeah, I can see sort of what he's saying with all of this. It's just lines being thrown at you and you make of it what you will. And
yeah, I've got to say, I'm not much of a fan of T.S. Eliot myself.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone reads T.S. Eliot out of choice. I think it gets sprung upon you in English classes or
Yeah, well, I remember.
university, or
Yeah, I remember too.
and
Yeah,
you have to study it, and you
Yeah.
go, all right. And I don't know, people just like to,
yeah. And then they sort of say, "Oh, I'm going to write a thesis on
yeah, to
T.S. Eliot."
talk, let's hear said it's just to look clever, and because
Possibly.
no one knows what he's on about, no one disagrees with you. So
Yeah. Yeah. There are some. Yeah, it's just odd little lines here and there. Yeah. Yeah. What you believe is what you are. A pair of dancing shoes. The Soviets are the blues. The Reds. It's. I think it's an unusual set of lyrics for an unusual song.
yeah,
Really, with this.
It brings to mind the Tia said it's. I think it's about that. Do you know? Oh, I don't know what it's about. Well, we can't prove me. It's the same as Del Boyce when he does that London tours.
Oh, well, ethnic tours. Yeah.
Goes, yeah, I'll show him where Jack the Ripper was buried. No one knows where Jack the Ripper was buried. Well, they can't prove me wrong then, can they?
No, that's it. And like, how did the Elephant and Castle get that name? They just come up with a load of rubbish, but it was funny. Yeah, I dare say. Yeah, I think with these lyrics, you make of them what you will, and I think he's left them deliberately open ended, that you draw what you and see what you see in them. So he's not trying to direct you in any way, but just give you something to think about, I guess.
Yeah, right. Well, we have made it. We are on the final track. So yeah.
Yes.
Between the Wheels.
Yes.
I like the
way I love the way this one starts.
Yeah.
It really comes in very powerfully. I mean, what do you think of this? Do you like this one?
It's a very cold sort of.
Yeah.
What's the word I'm looking for? Cold.
It's
not disturbing, but
foreboding is the description.
Yeah.
That's what it says. It the foreboding synths, and then you get that really heavy, moody, very dark sounding guitar coming in. Really.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really. I
like this as a closer though. This is
a cold. Yeah, I was just about to
Rush
say.
They always finished their albums with something a bit weird, didn't they? To sort of just to go, yeah. What do you think of that?
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, it's I do like this song. It's a very powerful song. Yeah, I mean it says here, like the beginning of it, get them foreboding synthesizers, which are really sort of almost offbeat. And then you've got the drums going against it, and then like a couple of triplets on big drums, and then bang, you get that real growl of licensed guitar. And it says here down-tuned guitar for this. I don't know what it's down-tuned to, and but Peart's drumming on this is pretty thunderous. It really.
I don't know if this Geddy's bass on this. Maybe that's what they're referring to down-tuned, but there is this like sort of a. There is this little push in there.
Well, on this one, it's a hybrid. He toggles between the bass pedals and playing the bass guitar.
Right.
And on this bit, it's the bass pedals, and they've got that really low sound. I mean, when I've seen them play this live, I mean, that bass seems to rattle the entire building, the entire venue when they played this. Really, really strong, and just say such a dark sound to bring this album to a close. And I think very much bookends thematically what was on the very first track of this album. This sort of really signs off the album in such a powerful way. Yeah, very. I love Neil's drumming on this. This is a really, really strong drumming performance on this one. Have you got anything about the lyrics at all on this? Because
No,
I don't want
yeah.
to. I feel like I'm sort of giving so much, and I don't want to be taking everything over.
No, that's fine.
But it says here, the song with its multiple meanings alludes once again to the Cold War, which seemed at the time to be immediately capable of really turning hot at a moment's notice. Odd lines. I mean, lines such as "You can fall from rocket's red glare down to brother, can you spare another war, another wasteland." And the contrast between rocket's red glare, so famously and patriotically alluded to in the Star-Spangled Banner, and the rocket's red glare that they may spell nuclear annihilation, another war, another wasteland, is brutal. It's almost brutal, it says here. The song is full of colourful metaphor, and an analysis by anyone but the listener may spoil the pleasure of its discovery. It's worth mentioning that this was around the time that Peart began to spend more time between the wheels himself while cycling his push bike on tour. So there you go. I think it's wheels within wheels, basically, of what's going on in the world. And it's, what it says here, slow fade out draws the song to a close because the band are improvising at the end over that doomy, they called it a doomy riff. This song was played an awful lot on a lot of tours, says here. Live staple to the end of Rush's career. One of the toughest albums of Rush's career was finished on this particular.
Yeah, I think this would be an interesting song to play. And again, it's a nice little mid set.
It always comes very, very strong live. But really very, very strong, and it was always sounded good. They really had a good live sound on this. If anything, it probably come into its own more live than what it is on this on the album. But I mean, great. We always say great lyrics, but just opening with "To live between a rock and a hard place, in between time, cruising in prime time, soaking up the cathode rays. To live between the wars in our time, living in real time, holding the good time, holding on to yesterdays." Well, yeah, what can you... Yeah, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Wheels can take you around, wheels can cut you down. We can go from boom to bust, from dreams to a bowl of dust. We can fall from rocket's red glare down to brother, can you spare another war, another wasteland, another and another lost generation. Wow. Yeah, it just I'm not going to say any more because it's just an awful lot. You can end up saying a whole lot again. Again, this was probably, I think the fact that they played this one quite a lot live, it was regarded as, again, one of their classic numbers. I think you've got to cut, even though this, I don't know if this polarized people as much as Signals did, because Signals was a bit of a shock to the system.
Yeah.
This possibly, although more electronic than Signals, it is a heavier, musically, it is a heavier album, as you said. But you've got a few classic tracks on here that have sort of stood the test of time and they would come and go from tours. Distant Early Warning, Red Sector A, and this one, Between the Wheels. They would be the ones that would be played a lot. But also Body Electric would come and go, perhaps not as much as those three. So I certainly see them play Red Sector A a few times and Distant Early Warning a few times, and certainly Between the Wheels. Body Electric, I only ever saw them perform that the once. I don't think there was anything. Oh, of course. Statistics. This was all, just as an aside, this was again recorded at the studio in Morin Heights, Quebec. Chart positions. Canada number 4, UK number 5, US number 10, which I find surprising considering they didn't tour in Europe.
Yeah.
Here in the UK, even though it charted quite high. So that's an interest. I don't know why they didn't tour here, didn't tour in Europe. Perhaps somebody might know. But I sort of got the impression that it was the album sales were, even though it was only 10 in US and 4 in Canada, whereas things like Moving Pictures and Signals went straight to number 1 in Canada. You know, it just yeah. So
how well was it promoted? Or
it might have been deliberately. It might have not got the promotion because of the subject matter. Possibly.
Yeah.
It could possibly be that. Yeah.
Time as well. It's, you know, what's the time of albums. Rush would have just slotted into that man of the moment period, and maybe music had moved on at that point. Rush were never they always did what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it, and just as the pendulum has swung at that particular time, they fell into that and things worked in their favor. Maybe the music Overton window had moved on again, and it wasn't. It's all their success has always been a tortoise and a hare situation, hasn't it? So
I guess so. You saying about
a couple of albums have been hits, basically just coming in handy.
Yeah, I believe so. I think that they were going to do things their way, no matter what was going on around them, and
what's going on around them adjusted to them now and then, and maybe just
occasionally
at that point.
But you know, it does have some critical acclaim, this album. I think even though the coin of phrase of its time subject wise, but it has actually stood up quite well, and I think Rush fans have come to appreciate it more. You said about the artwork, again, it's by Hugh Syme. I think with Hugh Syme, I think he never ever really failed to produce. He always produced something memorable with regards to their artwork.
It just suits the sound and the overall feel of the album. I mean, it's not quite obvious what's going on, but it's
no.
But it looks cool. Sometimes you just that's all you need.
Yeah, indeed. And
a character looking out over a horizon that's,
well,
you know,
in a state of flux, really.
Yeah.
But then, of course, and obviously you'll probably show this, but of course the inside one, the bit with the
egg,
the vice and the egg, the clamp and the egg, I should say, is that says it features a portrait by the famous portrait photographer Yusuf Karsh. I mean, I don't know who that person is, who had previously photographed legendary figures such as Martin Luther King, Winston Churchill, Albert Einstein, and Salvador Dali. So
there's a Dali. I think there's a Dali feel to that.
Yeah. Again, as you said, it just fits extremely well with the music. It's certainly a good marriage of the visual as well as the musical on that album. On this one, at the end, I always do a list of thanks in this sentence. In this sentence, they refer to their now ex-producer Terry Brown, and it's written in French, and I'm not even going to try and do it because it will come out as Del Boy. But basically translated, it means always our good old friend Brune or Brown. So he was not forgotten, but I think they were they knew that they had to part company, especially, I mean, it says this on the precursor of this, Rush faced the most major personnel change since the departure of original drummer John Rutsey. And it says here the band were unsatisfied with the production on Signals and keen to work with yet more electronic technology. The band decided that something had to change, and producer Terry Brown, who had been instrumental in their development, was equally unhappy with the synthetic direction the new music was taking, and so the working relationship between them was dissolved. So, and I think just as an aside, I think Terry Brown has since he said, yeah, I wanted to not be involved with that, because he said, I thought they were just going to become an electronic band. But obviously, in hindsight, it was another phase they were going through before they went on to something else. So, but he thought at that time they were going to stay electronic.
I suppose it's easier for me to say this now, but it seems Rush would always follow something to its conclusion. So with the long songs, it got to the point of, right, we've taken this as far as it can go. Now we have to regroup and and then, you know, with fairly quickly, really, with Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures, it's like, right, okay. I suppose Moving Pictures probably would have been explored a bit more, but because that album was such a success, right, need to change again. Signals, with moving on now, and then I guess with Power Windows, that will sort of come to its conclusion, or maybe even a bit more Hold Your Fire. But we shall cover that when we get to it. But yeah, this will come to its conclusion, and then in the later albums, it's a combination of everything. What's worked, they've kept. What hasn't worked, been discarded, and then it's all just comes together.
Yeah, so, indeed.
Yeah, but lots and lots to cover, and thanks for watching, everyone. This has been Grace Under Pressure, as per usual. This is your show, so join the conversation. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Where do you think this sits in the pantheon of Rush? And yeah, we're going to be taking a short break. There won't be a Rushcast next week. We're going to have but in 2 weeks we will be back, and we'll be covering Power Windows.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, thanks for watching.
Yeah. And
it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him. There we go.
Thanks for watching, everyone. And Rushcast will be back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Take care, folks. See you.
See you later.
Bye-bye.